What's up, everybody? Thanks for checking in on CBS Sports HQ. I'm Tommy Tran with Brady Quinn, and we are talking about Heisman candidates. About a quarter of the way through the season, Brady's curated his top five. And Brady, before we get to those candidates here, has anything surprised you thus far, 3-4 games into the season?
Not so much outside of maybe the strength of the Pac-12, and in particular the Pac-12 quarterbacks. So you're going to see a lot on this list, not necessarily starting off, but once we get through it, the level of play at that position in the Pac-12 in its final year of existence as we know it has been phenomenal. And I hope people are staying up late on those Saturday nights to see some of these West Coast games, because there's a big reason why a lot of these teams have been ranked in the AP poll, top 25, and it's really because of the quarterback play.
There are a handful of Pac-12 quarterbacks, and we're going to get to that list, but I can tell you starting at number 5, it is not a Pac-12 quarterback. Instead, it's going to be Oklahoma's Dillon Gabriel. You have him slotted the first quarterback we'll talk about here.
And let me start off by saying this. I could put a lot of guys as a part of this list at the quarterback position. You can make a case for them. This is kind of my criteria at this point in time. These are all quarterbacks that are leading teams right now that are undefeated, and they're putting up the sort of stats that I think you have to put up in order to be a part of the conversation. Now, whether that's right, wrong, or indifferent, that's how this award works. You got to have a team that's a part of the national championship conversation, and you have to have the stats to back it up. Dillon Gabriel has that so far for Oklahoma. He's really carried this team offensively so far, been incredibly efficient, throwing for over 300 yards per game right now, 12 touchdowns to only 1 interception, and he's really a perfect fit for Jeff Libby's offense there in Oklahoma. The biggest test is going to come here in a couple of weeks when they take on Texas. That will be an opportunity for his Heisman moment, but there's no doubt about it. Dillon Gabriel is a part of that conversation right now.
Yeah, you brought that up. A Cotton Bowl on October 7th. They do have Kansas on the 28th, and then November 4th, Bedlam against Oklahoma State. So Heisman moments available for Dillon Gabriel moving forward. Let's get to number 4, and we're getting to a quarterback, Beau Nix, out there in Eugene, Oregon.
You got to give him a lot of credit for the way he played versus Colorado last week, right? On a big stage. It was the most viewed game last week, and there was a little bit more of a put up or shut up moment, and I think he showed out, no doubt about it. This is why he came back to Oregon for an additional season, is to try to give himself a shot at winning a national championship, probably a Heisman Trophy as well. Now, his stats don't quite compare to the rest of the guys on this list. Only 11 touchdown passes to 1 interception. He's also been athletic enough on the ground to add some there, but he's completing nearly 80% of his passes. So he's been extremely efficient as well, and kind of perfect, again, running this system, running this offense. They still have the meat of their schedule left in the Pac-12, and you'll see a lot of these guys dropping kind of in and out as part of that conversation based on how they play. But so far, I think you saw Beau Nix in what was deemed to be a more hyped-up game versus Colorado really show out this past week.
Yeah, you mentioned the schedule. Washington, Wazoo, Utah, USC, and Oregon State still all left on that schedule. And one thing here, I don't know how much the other guys have it too. Oregon does have a history of their boosters helping out their quarterbacks. Joey Harrington with the big billboard. Beau Nix getting a little bit of help too. Do you think that's going to give him a
Every
little bump?
time I log on our site at cbssports.com, I see Bodacious across the top of it. So Bodacious has been a big thing where they're trying to brand him. They're trying to make sure, again, playing out there in the Pacific Northwest, you don't see a lot of people or staying up late at night. He needs more. They need to give him more attention because this guy's playing a really high level of football right now.
Yeah, Dan Lanning certainly is impressed with his quarterback naturally and the evolution that Beau Nix has displayed so far this season. You mentioned the Pacific Northwest. So let's just stay there because they also have a couple of teams we're talking about. In Washington State's another one with Cam Ward. You and I were trying to get our guy Dennis Dodd to get them in his power rankings. It took a couple weeks, but Dennis Dodd finally came through.
I am pounding the table for Cam Ward. If you have not watched this young man play the game of football, you've got to. He's a dual threat quarterback. He can create big plays. He has been phenomenal for Washington State so far this year. And they've been tested, too. They were tested this past week versus Oregon State, one of the top defenses in the Pac-12. They were tested on the road earlier versus Wisconsin, too. Got a good win there. So it's not like these are cupcake games he's playing through either. He's thrown for almost 1,400 yards so far already this season. 13 touchdowns, add 3 on the ground, too. 0 interceptions. You got to watch Cam Ward. They got another tough one this week, though. They're going to be taking on the UCLA Bruins. So, again, that Pac-12, you see them start to beat up on each other. But Cam Ward is must-see TV when you watch him play the quarterback position. He's had a heck of a season so far.
Yeah, UCLA was previously ranked. They did lose to Utah, got bumped out, but they still, Wazoo does. Then the Cougs have games against Oregon and Washington and perhaps the Pac-12 championship if they get that far. So we're getting from 3 down to the final 2 here. And again, Pacific Northwest, it happens to be a theme. Also the Pac-12, Kalen DeBoer and his Huskies, and he's got a quarterback in Michael Penix Jr. that certainly stands out to you.
Statistically speaking, he's the best quarterback in the country. He throws for over 400 yards per game. He's completing nearly 75% of his passes right now. And when you look at him, 16 touchdown passes to only 2 interceptions too. He's putting up a lot of numbers in a very pass-happy offense, and that's part of it. But he's led this Washington team to be a legitimate contender not only for the Pac-12, but potentially for a college football playoff berth and national championship. They are that good. Now, again, they haven't played the toughest schedule, but as we get on down the road, you're going to see him have the opportunity for some Heisman moments, and I can't wait to watch what he's able to do. He's been in college football for a long time, but he's making the most of this opportunity right now, playing at a really high level.
He's already at 16 passing touchdowns.
It's incredible.
For the Huskies so far. Their schedule does get tougher, much like Oregon's. They're going to have a gauntlet there: Oregon, USC, Utah, Oregon State, and Wazoo. All those coming up there in October and November. And then finally, we get to number 1 for you, and it's the reigning Heisman Trophy winner in Caleb Williams. Take me through the thought process. Obviously, he continues to ball out for Lincoln Riley and the Trojans.
He's just that good. I mean, he's the type of player when every time you turn on the tape, every time you watch one of his games, when they have the football, you feel like they're going to score, and in large part because of his ability, not only being lethally accurate and anticipating throws from the pocket, but also his ability to take off and create and buy time and space and even run downfield and be able to get additional yards that way. He doesn't have quite the stats that Michael Penix does, who I had at number 2, but that's because they don't throw the football quite as much. They actually can run the football a decent amount. Marshawn Lord's really come on for them at USC, so there's a little more balance there, but 15 touchdown passes to 0 interceptions. He's added 3 rushing touchdowns as well on the ground and over 1,200 yards passing. So Caleb Williams is putting himself right there again in the Heisman conversation. I think if we're being honest with ourselves, when I watch the tape, turn it on, there's no one who plays consistently at a high of a level as Caleb Williams does. He really should be the next 2-time winner, next to Archie Griffin, but he could get dinged depending on how this team and really how the defense for USC comes along and if they can help them out. But he's the best player in the country. It pains me to admit that as a Notre Dame alum, but he's a special talent.
Game got to respect game, though, right? And there's a reason why he's the projected number 1 overall pick. Maybe even having NFL teams want to maybe crash for Caleb, whatever the terminology is, tank for Caleb Williams. You brought up something, though, which I think is tough to do because, of course, the award is subjective.
Right.
Voters have either agendas, narratives, and things like that. It hasn't been since 74, 75 for Archie Griffin. So do you think voter fatigue might play against Caleb Williams this year? Sure.
It always does. I think people want the next new, fresh thing. And I think the other thing is we always talk about how you win that award. You have to have a Heisman moment. And for Caleb Williams, it has to be moments. And usually it's like, well, how do you trump what he did last year? I think if you watch him and his style of play, given their strength of schedule and the strength of schedule of the Pac-12, I think that actually plays to his advantage because if they run the table and if they can go undefeated into the Pac-12 and in the college football playoff, there's no doubt he's going to have enough big-time plays and big-time games to give himself those Heisman moments and be able to trump what he did a year ago. Statistically speaking, he's going to be right there too. So that's also a part of it, right? If you put up some numbers last year that get you to win it, you almost have to surpass those numbers to be a part of it. But either way, this is a better USC team. I think they are going to have to go through a really difficult schedule. If they go unscathed through it, you have to think he's going to be right there in New York waiting to hoist up again a second Heisman Trophy.
Yeah, to me it's interesting, Brady, because I think for Caleb Williams, it's just in recent memory, the last 10 years, basically since the inception of the CFP, there's only been 2 players to win the Heisman that didn't have their team get to the college football semifinals. It's Caleb Williams last year and then Lamar Jackson in 2016. And because I should say USC didn't make it to the CFP, I think team-wise, to your point, if they can get there, and he has similar statistics, that should be sort of a tiebreaker, I think, to give him that back-to-back.
No doubt. I mean, that's going to be ultimately how the Heisman's usually decided. And especially when I was back then when I was playing, only 2 teams got to play off for it. So if you were a part of that national championship game and you were the best player, you were probably winning the Heisman. Now, in this era, obviously with 4 teams playing, a little more room to have a couple more players in there. But looking at what Caleb did last year, he was so outstanding. He was still able to overcome that, win the award. If they're a part of it this year, you'd have to think he's a shoo-in.
We got to start wrapping things up. Before I let you again, this is an early lean, if you will, because there's still 3/4 of the season left to play. So just in your 5, though, what's the separation between, let's just say, a Penix and a Williams right now?
To me, I mean, it's pretty tight. I think, again, we haven't seen those 2 square off yet. They will have a chance to later on this season. That's largely going to dictate kind of a tiebreaker between those 2. But there's not a ton of separation. Michael Penix has been phenomenal. And really this early in the season, all these guys are kind of right in the mix. It's just Caleb Williams has the bigger brand in USC, and obviously coming off as the reigning Heisman Trophy winner, he's well known nationally. So I think people are looking forward to watching him. It was one of the most watched games this past weekend, taking on Arizona State. And it wasn't for Pete Prisco's Sun Devils. It was because it was Caleb Williams in a tight game, and then you were watching him, again, make sure to keep pace so his team wasn't in trouble versus the Arizona State. So he's going to get those opportunities throughout the rest of the schedule because they play such a difficult schedule.
All right, Brady, appreciate you. That's going to do it for us, everybody. Brady Quinn's, for now, top 5 Heisman candidates, and we'll be keeping tabs here on CBS Sports HQ.